Hello and welcome to Mothman's Bookshop. My name's Nicole, and today I'd like to tell you about Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Warning, I'll try and make this as spoiler-free as possible, but given it's a book review, there are bound to be a couple spoilers. Like many others, I had a Greek mythology phase in middle and elementary school that I never quite grew out of. Well, this book is perfect for anybody who still misses or is in that phase of their life. Piranesi is a retelling of the classic myth about the labyrinth, with a good share of interdimensional travel. Part of it also has some secret history vibes like the book, but I won't say anything more than that to avoid spoilers. I read this during my break, so don't be mad if this review seems a little bit sparse. Most of the summary is taken from the back of the book, but slightly adjusted to include some more details. Here goes. Piranesi's house is no ordinary building. Its rooms infinite, its corridors endless, its walls lined with thousands upon thousands of statues, all of which seemingly represent an aspect of either the book or Piranesi's life. Within the labyrinth of halls there is an ocean imprisoned. Waves thunder up staircases, rooms are flooded in an instant. But Piranesi is not afraid. He understands the tides as he understands the pattern of the labyrinth itself. He lives to explore the house and discover all of its secrets. But there is another in this house, a man he calls the Other, who visits Piranesi twice a week following a very specific schedule and asks for help with research into a great and secret knowledge. But as Piranesi explores, evidence emerges of yet another person, and a terrible truth begins to unravel, revealing a world beyond the one Piranesi has always known. Let's get into the review. It took me the first few pages or so to get used to the writing style and the weird capitalization, but after that I really enjoyed the book. Unlike a lot of other books, it was easy but at the same time sort of difficult to imagine this world that Piranesi was living in, as in it was easy to imagine very specific rooms and hallways that he described, and the statues were described really well, but it was a bit difficult to grasp the overall enormity of this labyrinth that he's living in because, there's so much of it, it's infinite, but I think we could have done a bit of a better job on that. Other than that, the world building itself is incredible, because even if you find it hard to imagine the sheer scope of this infinite labyrinth, the way individual hallways and rooms and statues are described is amazing, because there's so much detail and thought put into each description. There's also a lot of really great foreshadowing throughout the book. You get a lot of little hints that come back at you later when you actually start to piece things together, and it makes so much sense, especially if you reread the book like I did. I thought it was a lot of fun to go through and notice, like, oh, this is gonna come into play later, and this is hinting at this, and it's a lot of great foreshadowing that I highly suggest you look out for if you do read this book. In regards to the villain, I think the build-up and delivery was done really well, because at the end, when we actually find out who did everything and why everything is happening, the villain seems genuinely powerful and very menacing. And about the main character, there was a great twist at the end, which I won't spoil, but I do think it was very well done, and it makes a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. I'll be honest, there were a lot of really great things about this book, lots of parts that I thought were written really well, but certain parts were just sort of painfully mediocre. Around the time that Piranesi starts to piece things together, a whole bunch of names get introduced, and they're not like simple names like Max or Sally. It's all big Italian names, and it got a bit confusing. In a way, this works actually, because like us, Piranesi is going through the information without any previous context of the situation. We have to sort of piece the story together along with him, and I do think Clarke did a good job of writing a story that was confusing where it was needed and clear in other places. I don't quite know how to explain this last point without including spoilers, but the very ending, not the conflict resolution part, I mean the very, very end, lacks something like pizzazz? I don't really know, but it was a little bit lackluster. Final thoughts? I thought it was a good book. I'm not sure how much you could call this a myth retelling, because other than the labyrinth element, there wasn't much you could use to call it an actual adaptation. I guess if you consider the Other the Minotaur, then it counts, but the point is that the book itself is really well written. The story makes sense, and there aren't any plot holes or decisions made that don't make sense. It is a short and quick read, so I like that, and I did like the format, but it isn't for everyone, that's for sure. Sorry for the short episode this week. I did read this a little ago, so I don't remember too many of my original thoughts about the book. but this is what I remember. These are the important ones. Most platforms rate it at a 4.5. I rate it at a 3.8. Thank you all for listening to this episode of Mothman's Bookshop. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. If you did and would like to know when the next episode comes out, do yourself a favor and follow the podcast. And if you have any questions or recommendations, feel free to use the form in the description or join the Discord. Once again, my name is Nicole, and I'll see you next week here in Mothman's Bookshop.